Hello, I'm Jeff Kroll, and I'm just going to walk you through a quick little how-to on a couple strategies on assessing agency. So these are two strategies that I highly recommend that might be useful for your classroom. You may have to modify them, but let's take a look. So let's start by looking at what agency is, the two sort of characteristics of agency. One is to develop growth mindset, and the other is to take ownership over your learning. And as you can imagine, this would be a particularly challenging outcome to assign a specific score, let alone assign a specific grade to. If we want to encourage students to develop growth mindset, we need assessment strategies that allow for growth over time and to measure that and to give grades on that rather than a static point in time score. If we want students to take ownership over learning, we need to make sure that we offer assessment strategies that adhere to that. So it can be a challenging indicator, or I'm sorry, a challenging outcome to grade and assess. Before we get to the strategies themselves, the first thing you need to do is identify a couple focus areas of agency. So that is, look at the rubric, look at the different indicators on the rubric, and identify one, two, maybe even three indicators to focus on. Now, it's nice if you can identify and publicize those indicators before the lesson or throughout the course of a lesson. It's super nice if you can identify a couple focus indicators over the course of a project to really demonstrate growth over time. It's mega nice if you can identify by project over the course of the year the different indicators you're focusing on. So like in this matrix here, you can see that I can be sure that we're touching upon each indicator in different units throughout the year. So we can make sure that we've appropriately covered all agency indicators. I really recommend this as a strategy to discuss with a department or possibly a school team. It's possible maybe as a grade level team you want to have an overarching agency indicator for the year. If there's one thing or two things that you really want to make sure you're focusing on every unit, that might be another possibility. So let's just take a look at, we'll take Unit 3 here and look at those indicators. Did you know that there are standards language for the New Tech Learning Outcomes in ECHO? Be sure to explore that if you are not aware of that because it's super helpful. So here are the two sort of outcome standards, objectives, whatever you want to call them, for the focus indicators for agency. For this particular unit, use effort and practice to grow, and to seek feedback. And I've just created a sort of mini rubric there for those two indicators, just so I sort of have those on hand. So you can look at those. You can pause the video if you want and look at that spectrum there, or you can just look at the middle school agency rubric, which is where I took this from. So let's get to the actual assessment strategies. So the first strategy that I'm going to recommend is simply to collect evidence. Once we've identified the focus indicators for agency, we're going to spend the class time simply collecting evidence of this. So the way that I like to do this is to hold a physical clipboard, although if you have like a fancy pants iPad or something like that, you can use that as well. But anyway, I'll hold a clipboard and print out a class roster with a little bit of space for notes there, and just spend 5-10 minutes of group work collecting evidence around agency. So we're not answering questions as the teacher, if I'm the only teacher in the classroom at this time. I'm just collecting evidence, maybe for the first 10 minutes and perhaps the last 10 minutes of group work, or even individual work. Or if you have a team teacher, you can have one teacher collecting evidence while the other teacher is answering questions or hosting a small workshop, something like that. So you can see here some of the evidence I've collected from Jess. She tried a problem 3 times before asking help, looked back on previous benchmark work, and I even collected some of the actual quotes. So for example, Jess said during this class, "Does anyone need any help?" That's a piece of evidence that I want to be sure to collect because that is demonstrating the aspects of agency that we want to focus on. And if you want, you can put little pluses or minuses or pluses and deltas, depending on if you want to identify these behaviors and talk patterns as positive or negative based on the rubric. That's kind of up to you. It's possible you may also want to just keep an entirely neutral, maybe more scientific approach and just simply collecting the evidence and not ascribing positive or negative value to it. That's kind of up to you. It's also possible you may want to just collect evidence generally, not necessarily tied to the agency focus that we have for today. It's also possible you may want to include collaboration evidence here. So sort of group-wide collaborative behaviors that are either positive or negative or speak to certain attributes on the collaboration rubric. So just this general strategy of collecting evidence is a powerful one, particularly useful for agency, collaboration, and even aspects of the oral communication rubric, the ones that are less focused on presentation and more focused on interpersonal communication. So be sure to check that out and consider this, this strategy. At the end of a class period or maybe at the end of a week, I might look over the evidence with a student and from there assign a specific score or grade based on a conversation I have with that student. So that once we have this sort of bank of evidence, we can tie it back to the rubric. So the other method that I'm going to promote here is just the simple method of self-reflection, which can be as simple as at the end of a class period or again at the end of a week. Ask students to do some self-reflection and writing about where they would put themselves on the focus indicators for agency for this particular unit. So the prompt is as simple as the one here. Based on your work today, where would you put yourself on our agency rubric for this unit? And the student would do some writing, maybe even identify the exact place that they're at. Better yet, maybe consider using the assessment tool in Echo that you can hack. So the peer assessment tool in Echo is really cool because you can have these little rubrics populated, and you can ask students to do a self-assessment by checking that little box on the upper right-hand corner. And that way they can do a self-assessment and you can require them to do some written explanation. So that way you have that in Echo and you have that writing and just with other peer assessment things, you can use it to assign a score. You can give feedback on it. So that's also a nice little possible hack of the peer assessment tool to do more of a self-assessment. What I really like about the Echo one is that you can duplicate it quickly and you can sort of reassign it several times over the course of a unit. So if you do have rubric indicators or a specific rubric, you don't have to recreate it each time. You just duplicate it and assign it again. And you can see multiple iterations of the same assessment. For more, be sure to check out the agency resource in the Echo Resource Library. There's more in this document than I would have a chance to get to in a presentation, including some of the research behind or where the outcome of agency comes from and some of the research behind that. You can find tools to scaffold agency and with some concrete examples and much, much more. So be sure to check out the agency resource in the Echo Resource Library. And best of luck. And as always, if you have a really neato strategy, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear it and maybe add it to my little toolbox of agency assessment going forward. Good luck.